For the protagonist, violence was an everyday occurrence. He grew up in such conditions since childhood, when his father beat him senselessly. For him, violence became something like breathing. One day in prison, they painted his face like a target and put him against the wall. One of the prisoners used a homemade slingshot and shot coins at the main character. The main character wanted to be simply beaten as usual, and not to have various methods of violence invented. The prisoners concluded that their cellmate did not want to have fun with them. They believed that the young man needed money and therefore should respond kindly to their games. Up until this point, the hero had done everything he could to make money in prison. He once cleared snow all over the prison grounds for 301. Then he warmed up all the prisoners' shoes for 101. For 201, he was a dog for his cellmates all day long. As a live target, he could receive as much as 501. When he thought about making money, he agreed to the prisoner's idea. It was a juvenile prison, which held juvenile offenders under the age of 19. It is a place where violence and crime of varying degrees occur on a daily basis. The cell leader asked the main character to close his eyes so as not to damage them. Tom didn't like these games, but he still decided to listen to his elder's advice. Two prisoners held the guy down while the leader fired shots. At the first shot, the coin bounced off the wall and fell into the toilet. The expensive coin fell right to the bottom of the toilet bowl at a sufficient depth. One of the prisoners told the main character that he was a real lucky guy. The chief ordered the young man to go to the toilet immediately and pick up the coin. It would be too boring for him to just leave it like that, without finishing it. When the hero found himself in the toilet, he was told to get the coin with his mouth. A 501 coin lay several centimeters below the surface. The prisoners laughed at him and told him that someone had had severe diarrhea yesterday. Without thinking, the protagonist dipped his head into the toilet and grabbed the coin. All the prisoners were shocked by his actions and concluded that he would now smell like shit. The young man just sold his soul for only 501. However, the protagonist didn't think so, because he had just saved up 50,001. The prisoners decided to end the games and went to rest. Before leaving, the leader told Ju-young to tidy himself up and wash off the shit. The prisoners believed that in any case, you have to remain a human being, even if you don't have money. The main character, Ju-young, became such a creature in just 1 month. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for attempted murder. The prisoners didn't understand why that guy was so obsessed with money, because even any murder is nothing compared to money. One of the guards told Ju-young that he had a visitor. This was the reason why the protagonist saved up 50,001. In the visiting room, there was a young girl who was worried about her friend's appearance. The girl Dae-young was the protagonist's childhood best friend. She reproached her friend for leaving a disgusting first impression on his cellmates. Ju-yeon asked Diona why she visited him so often and spent money on him. The girl got angry and told the young man that she was his girlfriend. She brought him back a jar of coins that he had given her during several dates. She believed that her friend should not act like that, despite the fact that she had no family or parents. She believed that he was only doing this because they had made a promise to live together in Seoul after graduation. She insistently asked Ju-young to take care of his body and not worry about money. The warden announced that visiting hours for prisoners were over. Before leaving, the girl asked her friend for only one thing, that he think about how to get out of here as quickly as possible. She asked him not to try so hard because these were just stupid promises of childhood. When the girl left the visiting room, the protagonist's face changed. The story between Dae-young and Ju-young happened back in middle school. The main character apologized to his girlfriend for his father's antics. The girl was sitting there all dirty, and there wasn't a single place on her that wasn't bruised. She asked her friend not to apologize for something he didn't do. She felt that now was not the time to worry about her, because her friend should think only about himself first. She told her friend that his father was in a coma after being hit with a flower pot. If the main character's father doesn't wake up, the police won't let him go so easily. Considering the domestic violence that Jo-yeon has been subjected to all this time, the punishment would be too harsh. The attempted murder trial began soon after. The court sentenced Ju-young to 3 years in a juvenile detention center. He didn't understand why he was being sent to prison for resisting only once, when he had been beaten by his father all his life. As the guards took him away, his girlfriend asked him to watch himself and not skip meals. She insistently asked him to report to her any incident where they tried to offend or humiliate him. He promised her that he would be fine throughout his entire sentence. He immediately decided for himself that he would be a model prisoner in order to reduce his sentence. New troubles may lead the protagonist to extend his sentence. He just needs to get through these 3 years without any incidents. Every day he took out photographs of himself and his best friend. The cell leader saw this photo and started to bully Ju-yeon. He joked that the girl was the prisoner Ju-young's lover, but he said that she was just a friend. The leader asked the young man to give him this photo. Ju-young was ready for anything, but not for this act. Ju-young's resistance angered the leader and his expression changed. He swung his fist at Ju-young and decided to remind him of the rules of conduct. However, he didn't have time to hit the guy, because the warden entered the cell with a new prisoner. The leader realized that there was new meat in their gang. There was a young man standing at the door who didn't seem to be at all friendly. The warden persistently begged the leader not to create problems in the cell and decided to watch them for a while. All the prisoners said together that they knew this new guy. According to them, The new prisoner killed 7 hooligans in his school. This young man's name was Ma Guillaume, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Among all prisoners, this was the longest sentence for a minor. The main character could not believe that such a fragile guy could kill 7 people. The observer asked his comrades not to be weaklings and ordered them to rush at the newcomer. He didn't care that the prisoner had killed 7 people, and boldly went to confront him. He informed his comrades that the new prisoner's face was suitable for the role of a murderer. The leader kindly suggested to the guy not to make noise and to accept their order in a good-natured manner. He extended his hand in agreement, but Ma Guillaume did not shake it. He just turned around and walked towards his bed. This act angered the leader, and he rushed at the guy with his fists. When he struck, he deftly dodged and struck back. All the prisoners were waiting for the turn of events and actions from the newcomer. The protagonist immediately noticed that this young man was completely different, and did not look like the one who killed 7. Eventually, the leader managed to beat the newcomer and throw him to the ground. He threw his head back and a stream of hot blood spurted from his mouth. The head of the cell began to kick Jem until he lost consciousness. He advised him to know his place and treat all prisoners with respect. The protagonist and some of the prisoners thought that the newcomer would at least put up a little resistance. After what happened, everyone went to their cell and went about their business. The person watching the camera continued his antics and forced Guillaume to bring him water. However, he continued to refuse to carry out completely ordinary orders. The prisoners beat up Guillaume as a crowd, because they did not understand who taught him to behave so badly. The main character believed that even a pig would not have acted so stupidly when faced with a butcher. He thought he would have a hard time because of this young man. Night fell and everyone went to bed. Ma Jem looked absolutely terrible, and his face was completely swollen from the blows. Juyong advised him to please his boss a little so as not to get punished. According to the heroes, the boss is the king and president of this cell, and it is only natural to do what he says. Ma Guillaume didn't understand why his cellmate lived so humbly. The main character only now realized that he actually puts up with everything that happens around him. But after this remark, he intends to continue to restrain himself and live humbly. This will be until he gets out of prison. The next day, Diane was going to visit her friend in prison. She remembered that he had lost too much weight, so she decided to get him something to eat. She decided to go for lunch to touch Ju-yeon's soul. As she was crossing the street near the prison, a bus crashed into her. The last thing the girl saw was the bright light from the bus headlights. That evening, the main character slept badly and tossed and turned constantly. The girl fell dead on a pedestrian crossing and showed no signs of life. When the main character woke up, the warden came to him with condolences. He couldn't understand what had happened, and they told him about a car accident near the prison. The warden told everything down to the smallest detail, and that the deceased was Ju-young's friend. When the main character heard the above, he fell into a stupor. From that moment on, he withdrew into himself and did not speak to anyone. Only Ma Guillaume noticed the deviation in his cellmate's behavior. The observer discovered that the toilet had not been cleaned by the main character today. He wanted to pounce on Ju-young, but at the last moment something stopped him. He saw that the prisoner was looking at a photo of a beautiful girl. The other prisoners explained to the leader that, apparently, Ji-young's girlfriend had died in the accident. The observer realized that the girl had come a long way to visit Ji-young, so she was not his best friend, but his lover. He snatched the photograph from the main character and asked him about his future plans for life. He took a look at the photograph and put it up for auction for his fellow inmates. The starting price for the lovers' photos was around 500 won. In a few seconds, the price rose to 1,000 won. One of the prisoners wanted to go on a date with this girl, but his mouth was immediately shut. The leader said that he would have had a lot of fun with this girl if she were alive. All these conversations depressed the main character, and he could not control himself. Ma Guillaume watched what was happening and did not interfere for now. When Ju-young saw his gaze, he remembered the conversation that night about humility. Without thinking twice, Ju-young walked up to the supervisor and hit him in the face. The blow was so strong that he flew back to the wall and fell to the floor. All the prisoners were in shock over what happened. Some time ago, the prisoners went to work in the workshop. Then the main character told his cellmate that his father was the right hand of a successful gang leader. He also said that he was beaten daily since childhood. However, he could do nothing to save himself and continued to live with his father. But one day he couldn't stand it anymore. When his father gives it to him, well, he immediately sorts it out. While his father beat him to death, he learned to fight. Thanks to this, he was able to deal with all the people in his cell. His greatest achievement was beating up the cameraman. He wanted to offer him money, but Ju-young no longer needed it. He struck the onlooker in the head again and sent him flying. The entire face of the cameraman was smashed to blood and had no clean spot. The protagonist dealt him a finishing blow and said that the girl no longer existed. As a child, Ju-yeon's father told him to follow in his footsteps and become a gangster. He constantly beat him so that he would learn to stand up for himself. That is why the hero's father arranged a daily cycle of beatings. When Ju-young was younger, he couldn't even look him in the eye properly. He believed that he had to become stronger in order to answer to his father. He had to become stronger until the day a dragon tattoo appeared on his body. The only place he could vent his anger was in those damn dragon eyes. When there was no one conscious among the prisoners, someone entered the cell. The warden couldn't believe that the calm Ju-young had done this. He did not deny it and confessed to what he had done. He was moved away from his cellmates to a separate cell for a while. Of all the things, he took with him only a photograph of the late Diona. He always remembered Diana's words about being beaten by his father. She believed that no parent could beat their child like that the day before school started. The main character's father should actually have congratulated him on his first day of school, not beaten him up. Ju-young joked about it because beatings were nothing new to him. Diona admitted that she was going to talk to her friend's father about all the situations. Ju-yeon reminded her that she promised to never even go near his house. If the girl breaks her promise, she must call Ju-yeon oppa for the rest of her life. Diona recalled the past promise that she and Jo-yeon would go to Seoul after graduating from school. She plans to move to Seoul in the near future as she is sick of this damned life in the orphanage. For herself, she built an ideal plan for her future life. The main character could not imagine his future life without Diona. She invited him to go with her, but he refused. She insisted that they should spend their whole lives together. After that, she extended her little finger to him and reminded him that this was a childhood promise. If Ju-yeon breaks this promise, he will call Diona Nuna for the rest of his life. Suddenly, a photographer approached Diona and Ju-yeon, mistaking them for a couple. He offered to take a photograph for them that would stay with the main character for the rest of his life. In solitary confinement, Ju-yeon was restless and smashed his fists against the wall. If only he knew that once he got to this place, Diona would pass away. He blamed himself for the fact that the girl kept visiting him. He spent several more days in solitary confinement with tears in his eyes. The warden noticed his apathy and depression, and tried to somehow cheer him up. And also, it seems, the warden noticed that you, dear YouTube viewer, are watching this video, not subscribing to the channel and not leaving a comment. The warden demands either a bribe or leaving a comment, otherwise he will complain to the prison warden. So it's up to you to choose. I advise you to subscribe to the channel and leave a funny comment. It's better not to anger the warden. He said that there is no need to give up, despite the unpleasant situation that has occurred. The man can no longer turn a blind eye to Ju-yeon's suffering. He asked the main character in a humane manner to calm down and eat a little. There is nothing that can be done about Diona's death, and one must move on with life. The words spoken made the main character feel even worse, and he burst into tears like a girl. At this time, in the dining room, Ma-gyeom heard some rumors from the prisoners. They were discussing Ju-yen, who had beaten all his cellmates half to death. Everyone understood that this situation happened because Ju-yen's friend died in a car accident. One of the gossips said that there is now a new warden in Ju-young's cell. Suddenly, one of the prisoners approached him and hitting him, pinned him to the table. He asked what kind of gossip was going on behind his back. He considered it important to be the center of attention for all the rumors about the Watchers. This young man's name was Park Chung-chan, who was serving time for particularly serious robbery. He asked the gossip who this guy was who became an overseer through a coup. Park Young-chan was afraid that his gossipy cellmates would also want to overthrow him. The young people fell silent and regretted everything they had said. The next moment, they assured the overseer that they would never remove him. Chung-chan picked up the gossip who was lying in the food, and he immediately asked for forgiveness. The warden asked his cellmates what the name of the guy who had carried out the coup was. Ma-gyeom heard that the gossips mentioned Ju-yeon's name. A week later, the warden told Ju-yeon that the warden was still in the hospital. The warden said that given the tragedy that had happened, they had released Ju-yeon much earlier. He asked the prisoner not to get into trouble again. Ma-gyeom sat in his cell and waited for his cellmate to arrive. At that moment, Ju-yen, who had been sitting in solitary confinement for about a week, appeared in the cell. Jem now looked at his comrade differently, because he had overthrown the overseer himself. He believed that his cellmates would not let Ju-yeon live no matter what. When all the prisoners ran up to the incoming Ju-yeon, Gyeom became noticeably scared. However, they ran to the main character with the aim of inquiring about his condition. It became clear that they now treated him as an overseer, with special care and attention. They ran around him and brought him water and gave him massages. At this moment, the main character realized something for himself. At the parents' school, parents, appearance and grades, and other factors were of particular importance. But here at the Juvenile Detention Center, force is everything. During the day, all the prisoners in the cells went out for a walk to the stadium. Ma-gyeom, as always, stood apart from everyone and filled out a personal diary. The main character approached them and called him to talk. He asked him why he did this during the fight. Ma-gyeom couldn't understand what he did wrong, but Ju-yeon reminded him that he stopped him when he tried to kill the overseer. Gyeom then grabbed his arm and stopped the beating. Ju-yeon didn't understand why he did this, because he himself ended up here for killing 7 people. Prisoner Gyeom remembered how he killed 7 villains at school. His classmates also asked him why he did it. When Gyeom tried to explain himself to his comrade, a third person approached them. The young man asked if it was really Ju-yeon himself in front of him. It was the overseer who had been inquiring about the guy who had carried out the coup in the dining room. He asked Ju-yeon how he managed to beat up Kim Seon-ho. He wondered why he had rebelled against his supervisor. The overseer asked Ju-yeon if he really wanted to take the overseer's position that much. He said that he didn't care about this place and asked the supervisor to disappear. The young man got angry at the main character and reprimanded him for his manner of speaking. He stabbed him in the stomach and said that he hated people like Ju-young. He wanted to teach the boy a lesson instead of the beaten Kim Seon-ho. The watchman wanted to show the guy what awaits a dog who dared to bite his owner. He pinned him against the stadium net and began throwing punches. At some point he stopped when he saw that a guard was watching him. He explained to the jailer that they were just making fun of each other. Juen's comrade Ma Gyeom stood near what was happening. The overseer said that whoever takes the overseer's place can fight as much as his heart desires, for the sake of maintaining order. He decided to beat Juyen to the same extent as he had once beaten the overseer. After that, he threw the guy to the ground, but he didn't even resist. The observer was not interested in fighting with him, because he behaved like a beaten dog. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing a dragon tattoo on his arm. The main character immediately noticed this tattoo, which his father also wears. He recalled scenes from his childhood when his huge father would lift him up to strike him. He held it with his hand, which also had a dragon tattoo on it, just like the beholder's. This drawing remained in Juyen's memory forever. Judging from Ju-young's appearance, he didn't look scared at all, and this was a normal thing for him. The observer realized that he was indifferent to everything only because of that car accident. Suddenly, the main character kicked the viewer in the face. Thanks to this, the main character managed to dodge and end up behind the prisoner. He twisted his arm and pressed his head against the net. The observer did not understand what the main character thought of himself. When he spoke up, Jong kicked him in the head again. The overseer insistently recommended that he be released in order to stay alive. Ju-yeon didn't care because he knew that this man had some kind of relationship with his father. When he grabbed his hand, the supervisor asked him what he was going to do. Without thinking, Ju-young twisted his arm, breaking several bones. He then struck the onlooker on the head, causing him to scream in pain. For as long as he could remember, the only place he could vent his anger on was his dragon tattoo. When he was a child, everyone said that Ju-yeon's dad was a gangster and bullied other people. They shouted at the main character that his father was a black sheep who was spoiling the whole flock. The young man was used to remaining calm in such situations. When he came home, he heard someone else's scream. When he burst inside, he saw a beaten Diona and an angry father. The father immediately realized that this girl was his son's girlfriend. The main character was worried about his friend's condition, because she was unconscious. The father explained that Diona had the audacity to enter someone else's house and make some other claims. She told her father to never dare beat his son again. After this thoughtless act, the father decided to teach his son's girlfriend a lesson. The main character tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy for him. The father promised that if Diona said anything to him again, he would immediately send her to heaven to her parents. After these words, Juen could no longer remain calm and beat his father. After the beating, the father was hospitalized in a coma. Doctors insisted that the man had little chance of coming to his senses. Only a miracle could help him survive. The entire prison gathered around Juyen and the beaten overseer. Many prisoners believed that Ju-young was a psychopath and should only be kept in solitary confinement. Immediately after his last prison term, he took up his crimes again. The viewer's arm, which had a tattoo, was completely swollen. The guards announced that the walking time was over, and the prisoners should return to their cells. There was a third person watching all this. It turned out that it was the main character's father who came to the prison warden. The prison director's name was Kwan Chang, and he was happy for the health of Ju-yeon's father. The prison warden asked the man who he had come to visit. At this time, all the prisoners in the cell were going about their business. No one present spoke to Ju-yeon because he was doing something completely absurd. A guard looked into the cell and said that someone had come to see Ju-young. The main character knew that only Diona could visit him. But now she is dead. The main character was worried because he didn't know who might visit him this time. The mother ran away from the father a long time ago, and all the relatives don't want to know him. They and the warden approached the room leading to the prison warden's office. Ju-young immediately became even more alarmed because he felt something was wrong. His father was sitting in the office and was very happy to meet him. The man said he enjoyed watching his son play with the kids. Ju-yeon's father was named Jang Gang-hyun, and he did indeed have a huge dragon tattoo on his chest. The father's doctor noticed that the prisoner was quite surprised by this meeting. He told him that his father had recently come to his senses and was now completely healthy. Ju-young remembered that the doctor had previously said that his father had little chance of coming to his senses. Since then, the main character believed that his father would not be able to get out of the coma. Father still couldn't believe that someone had managed to send him, the right hand of the head of the mafia, to intensive care. He announced to everyone present that only his own son could have done this. When he opened his eyes and realized that he was in the hospital, he felt too sad, and so he immediately decided to go to prison and see his son, no matter what. He told Ju-young that he loved him very much, but his eyes bulged out of his head. The father said that he could do anything for the future of his son, because he was too powerful. When he said that he had to kill that girl, the hero fell into a stupor. When Diona was crossing a pedestrian crossing, something terrible happened to her. She saw the bright headlights of the bus that later hit her and killed her. When she was lying on the road with her last breath, the protagonist's father was nearby. She plaintively asked him for help, but he continued to stand in place. She didn't immediately recognize him as Ju-yeon's father, because she also hoped that he wouldn't be able to get out of the coma. Despite the current situation, Juyen's father did not help the girl. He said that he was ready to do anything for his boy. He dealt a powerful blow to the girl's head with a crutch, and she died immediately. Finally, he told her that she would never understand him, because she never had parents. Juyeon's father always knew that he would endure everything because he was worthless. But that day, for the first time, he realized that he was capable of something. He knew that it was that girl who prompted his son to do this. That's why he decided to get rid of the obsessive girl for the sake of love for his son. The protagonist immediately struck his father, and the prison warden ordered his subordinates to stop his brutality. The guards caught Juyong and incapacitated him with electric shock. The main character screamed throughout the entire camera from the electric shock he received. The father realized that his son wanted to take revenge on him for the death of his friend. He decided to tell Juyong the only way to defeat him. Gan said that all members of his organization were in this prison. They just got their red dragon tattoos. Some of them will certainly become pillars of the organization in the future. Juyen's father wanted his son to become the best of these people. The son of a gang leader's right-hand man must become the best in a juvenile prison. He believed that if his son followed in his footsteps, he would soon become many times better than him. He advised Juyong to prepare to fight the heavenly dragon to take his place. The man believed that his son would be able to achieve what he had not achieved in his entire life. If Juyong reaches this position, his father will be completely happy. Gan asked the prison warden to take care of his boy. Suddenly, the main character snatched the electric weapon from the hands of the guards and began to threaten his father. One of the father's members was able to stop Juyen's blows and throw him aside. This young man's duty was to protect the boss from any danger. He believed that the strength of the Heavenly Dragon Commander could not be overcome with just blows. The father asked his son to look back and understand that he would never reach him. The man believed that Juyong's recklessness only made his life more difficult. He said that the only way to kill him was for Juyong to take control of the entire prison. The main character did not want to believe these words, because he wanted to spend his entire prison term as a calm person. When all the members of the group left the prison, the main character was left alone with his thoughts. At this time, Ma Gyeom and several other prisoners were working in the workshop. Comrade Juen was alone making some kind of stool. The warden thanked him for his high level of work and ordered him to go on vacation. All the prisoners began to mock him because he was good with a hammer due to his past experience at school. They believed that he was thrown into prison for no reason, since he was incapable of killing 7 people. One of the prisoners brought tools into the cell, and the guard asked him to put them on the shelf. The young man's arms weakened and he dropped the box of tools on the floor. Nails rained down right at Ma Gyeom's feet. When the guy raised his head, he saw his old friend in front of him. It turned out that they graduated from high school together with Ma Gyeom. Gongming saw Ma Jem on the news and did not believe that he would meet him in prison. He said that he had long wanted to ask his old friend one question. He wondered if Ma Jem had really been able to kill 7 people as shown on the news. According to him, Jem was a model boy since childhood. The supervisor asked Gu Ming to shut up and return to his workstation. From the nervous conversation, Guillaume squeezed the wax with the nail in his hand, and it started bleeding. When the protagonist returned to his cell, he kept repeating his father's words in his head. The father then said that the only thing that could lead to his death was if his son took over the entire prison. The main character's eyes lit up just from the thought of his father. He didn't know where to start with his plan to control the entire prison. Suddenly he heard that the prisoners were hungry and began to dream about pizza. They even wanted to complain to the organization about human rights violations due to the fact that they had been on hunger strike for a long time. They stopped their conversation because of the appearance of the warden. Without fear, Juyen approached the warden and called him out for a talk. The prisoners did not understand why their cellmate was even talking to such people. Juyong confidently asked the warden to order pizza for all the prisoners in that cell. The warden yelled at the prisoners and asked them not to forget that they were in prison. He called the protagonist outside to discuss his actions one-on-one. After some time, several pizza boxes appeared in the cell. All the prisoners were grateful to the new warden for the pizza. The main character could not believe that all the prison staff obeyed his father. Even the prison warden is under Ganhyun. Now all the prison staff treat Juyen with special care, as if he were that man's son. He wanted to check what he was now allowed to do in this prison. Suddenly, the main character's thoughts were interrupted by the cry of one of the prisoners about Ma Gyeom's condition. He sat in the corner and didn't eat pizza with everyone else. During one of the workdays, Ma Gyeom worked together with Juyeon. Gummin approached them, again bringing boxes of nails to the workers. He threw the box down and nails rained down on Gyeoma. He pretended that it was all unintentional, as if his hands had slipped off the box. Gyeon asked Gunmin what he was trying to achieve from him with his actions. 3 prisoners stood up for Gongming. Gongming lied to his comrades that his friend was a hooligan, but it turned out that he was a brutal killer. The young man admitted that he had lied and that Guillaume was his friend from childhood. He asked Guillaume about these childhood memories, but he said that he did not remember it. The young man took a swing at Comrade Zuen and decided to restore his memory. Before this, there had already been an unpleasant situation between Gu Min and Ma Guillaume. Gu Ming locked his old comrade in a box and nailed it shut. When Jem asked to be released from the box, He only called his cellmates to come and see this circus. He decided to start the most interesting part as soon as possible and began hammering nails into the box. Guillaume was scared by what was happening, and all the prisoners realized that he was not capable of killing anyone. Gongming dealt his old comrade several blows to the body. Mage Guillaume got angry and decided to show those present how he kills people. The warden announced that the prisoners' break was over and they needed to return to work. Gongming waved Ma Guillaume away and asked him not to touch him. Ma Guillaume returned to Juyeon and continued working. After work, the prisoners argued about who was better, Jesus or Buddha. One big prisoner decided to stop the religious war and suggested that the boys pray. The prisoners went to prayer, and the main character remained sitting next to Jem. Juyeon thanked Guillaume for stopping him from beating up the overseer. Otherwise, he would have rotted here for another 10 years. He said that he needed to get out of prison as soon as possible because something terrible was coming. He said that he had to meet his father, who killed Diona. From his friend's stories, Ma Guillaume remembered that his father was in a vegetative state. The hero decided to tell this story later, but now he thanked Guillaume for giving him a chance for a quick release. Ma Guillaume thought that something was teasing him, because he would have to sit and rot in prison for about 20 years. After some time, prisoner Ma Guillaume went to work again. The warden handed him the key and asked him to clean up the room. He left the hero alone and left his office. When Ma Guillaume was cleaning, he saw a moth on the table. The memories of the past made his chest tighten with fear. 11-year-old Gongming showed him his collection of butterflies. For Guillaume, insects were disgusting. Moths and butterflies were no exception. At that time, young Gongming was his first friend. However, all of Gongming's classmates thought he was very strange. This was because Gun walked down the street and collected various insects in a box. His classmates began to make fun of him because of this and asked him to eat all the insects he collected. Jem appeared in the classroom and asked those present to return to their study places. All the students in the class were afraid of Guillaume because he was the class president. The president approached Gongming and asked if he was okay. In response to saving minds, he invited his friend to come visit him. However, at that very moment, the other students asked Guillaume to play football with them, and he agreed. The following year, Gunmin and Guillaume went to different classes and began to see each other very rarely. One day, Guillaume heard rumors about Gunmin. Thanks to these rumors, Guillaume came to the basement in search of Gun. Min suddenly pressed him against the wall and asked him not to utter a single word. He locked him in the closet for his own safety. Guillaume didn't understand what was happening, because when Min locked him in, he laughed evilly. All the students present were happy that they managed to catch one bug. They offered Min to join their team, but in exchange he would give them his best cockroaches. When Guillaume asked to be released from the closet, Gongmin said that after catching the insect, it must be cut up. He grabbed a hammer and began to hit the cabinet. In the cell with the prisoner was Gongming, who said that everyone liked butterflies, but considered moths disgusting as before. He squeezed the moth in his hand and crushed it into small pieces. Ma Guillaume asked his comrade not to make a fool of himself. He said that he immediately noticed how Jem pretended to be nice and exemplary. According to him, Jem pretended to be his friend, but in reality he distanced himself from him as much as possible. He called himself a nasty moth, and Gemma a beautiful butterfly that everyone loved. Once he realized this, every day became more and more difficult for him. He blamed Guillaume for causing him to become like this. When he heard that Ma Guillaume had killed 7 people, he went completely crazy. Min clenched his fists and decided to remind Jem about the existence of karma. He and his comrades grabbed Guillaume and promised to turn him into dust. It also reminded him of some moments from school that he felt hurt about. Min asked the prisoners to put the captured bug in a box and then cut it into small pieces. A moment later, Ma Jem found himself locked in a box that was wrapped with a rope. Ma Guillaume asked his comrade how he could do this to him. He said that there was a special gift for him in the box, and Guillaume saw crawling bugs. Prisoner Guillaume kept all his feelings to himself so as not to scream throughout the room in fear. Gongmin told his comrades that Guillaume could not be a murderer, because he was a real coward. Juyen entered the room and asked Gongming what to do next. All the prisoners were alarmed by the appearance of a stranger here. Gongming said that he would make Jem scream, and after that, the protagonist sharply hit one of the prisoners. With his next blow, Juen threw one of the prisoners towards the box where Jem was sitting. Ma Guillaume calmed down a little due to the appearance of the protagonist. He remembered that Juyen had promised to pay him for saving him from a long sentence. Not long before, everyone in the cell was discussing that Ma Guillaume had not appeared in the cell for a long time. Someone reported that the warden asked Guillaume to help him with cleaning. The main character asked the warden for permission to go, and so he appeared in the room where the massacre of Jem took place. A huge prisoner entered the room and was interested in Juyong. The man didn't like that he was constantly causing a fuss lately. Before, he didn't understand Juyong's motives at all, but now everything became clear to him. He concluded that the overseer was close to Ma Guillaume. He rushed at the main character with his fists and offered to be friends with him. He was immediately stopped by other prisoners and thrown to the floor. The main character said that he would only befriend him over his dead body. Juyeon asked Gongming why he was doing this to Guillaume. He said that he had to endure a lot because that traitor pretended that they were friends. According to him, Guillaume was constantly pulling him down, trying to poison him like a viper. He warned the protagonist to be careful when dealing with Guillaume. The huge prisoner rose to his feet and grabbed Juyen. He again insistently recommended that Juyong become friends with him. The main character grabbed the giant's finger and decided to break it. His actions were anticipated by Gongming, who immediately thrust a sharp object into his stomach. Suddenly Ma Guillaume appeared and threw a chain around the giant. Gongming didn't understand how he managed to get out of the locked box. It turned out that the lock on the box broke the moment Juyong threw one of the prisoners into it. Jin continued to squeeze the giant's neck and he asked him to let go. Gongming shouted at him to pull the chain tighter. Guillaume warned the giant that if he used force, he would immediately lose his neck. The next moment, the man fell unconscious to the floor, and his head was completely blue. Ma Guillaume approached Gongmin to talk, but he was scared. The young man admitted that he was just a victim here, because everything happened because of Guillaume. He began to cry because he was afraid that the same thing would happen to him as to the giant. He fell to his knees and began to apologize to his former friend. He asked to perceive what was happening as the mistake of another fool. Ma Guillaume calmly told Gongming that he never considered him a loser. Gongming's selfish delusion has already ruined Jem's life and it can't be changed. Jen had already managed to kill 7 people and now began to think about what to do with Gongming. But only at this moment did he realize that Gongming was not so hateful to him. At the end of the conversation, he said that for him they had always been friends. Even though Guillaume forgave his comrade, Juyan still hit him on the head. This was done because Gongming was able to rip open Juyong's stomach. In the cell, the protagonist reproached Guillaume for being afraid of a weakling like Gongming. Juyong knew what had happened between Jem and Gongming earlier, but he was incredibly glad that his comrade did not consider Min his enemy. Ma Guillaume thanked his cellmate for saving his life. One of his comrades approached Gongming and tried to bring him to his senses. He asked the young man why he had left the cell without his permission. He punched him in the face for leaving him alone with the cockroaches. The man thought he would die of fear, because there was no one to catch the cockroach. After beating Gongming, his blood appeared on the man's face. He started shouting throughout the room that he hated dirt and germs. He grabbed the protagonist by the shirt and rubbed himself against it. Fortunately, the protagonist did not hit him for his thoughtless act and simply called the madman dirty. The warden entered the room and announced that the work was over, and the prisoners should go to their cells. The prisoner looked at the protagonist and saw that it was Juyan himself in front of him. During one of the walks, all the cellmates gathered around Juyong. The protagonist asked the reason for this, but they said that it made them feel safe. Gongming from the next cell said that with Juyong around, no one would dare to pick on him. The main character didn't care and simply asked not to bother him, as he had things to do. In his head, there was only a blue dragon surrounded by red flowers. He went looking for guys with this tattoo. True, he didn't know where these small fry of the damned group were. The main character was approached by Guna Ming, who offered to help in the search. The main character said that he was looking for a certain tattoo among the prisoners. Earlier, television reported that there was an increase in crime among minors. The formation of gangs that engage in armed robbery with the aim of stealing money is becoming common. Crime and violence among students is an ongoing problem. Guna Min heard the news and decided to tell his cellmates how he got there. There was once a famous Teokbokki restaurant in his area. One day, a psychopath came into the restaurant who was the son of a deputy. He asked the waitress to serve him Teokbokki, which he later did not like. This young man formed his own criminal gang, hiding behind his father's power. He lunged at the waitress because the Teokbokki was cooked incorrectly. Together with his gang, he destroyed the restaurant in a few minutes. But at that very moment, Guna Min, who considered himself the leader of the Teokbokki fan club, was in the restaurant. Then he achieved his legendary victory over the gang of the deputy's son and became a Teokbokki hero. The deputy's son complained to his father, and Guna Min ended up in prison. He said he didn't regret anything, but the prisoners asked him to tell it to someone else. The prisoners whispered among themselves and said that Guna Ming was a liar. Guna Min said that all his stories are based on real events. The main character decided for himself that he would never believe a single word that Guna Ming said. However, this story seemed true to Zhang, because in nature, aphids and ants live in symbiosis, since aphids give the ants sweet honeydew, and the ants give them protection. It was similar to his relationship with the bullies. Guna Min knew that with Juyon, he would have complete freedom to express himself. Guna Ming wanted to become the right hand of the overseer Juyong so that his life would become a bed of roses. The young man was planting flowers and suddenly heard a strange voice. Because of his clumsy actions, dirt got on the face of the man who was afraid of germs. Guna Ming remembered the moment when that man poured pesticides into his mouth. All he wanted was to clean his mouth of dirt. This young man was an authority figure from Guna Ming's previous cell. He had a certain diagnosis, according to which he is afraid of any dirt on his body. He asked Guna Ming to wash the dirt off his face, and he remembered the bug spray. The man grabbed a bottle of spray and decided to wash Guna Ming's face first. Naturally, the spray made the young man's entire face sting. The crazy man said that he came here to ask where Juyan was. He knew that he was sitting in the same cell with Guna Ming. The psycho said that Juyan once told him that he was dirty. He invited Guna Ming to go with him and opened his shirt, revealing that same tattoo. At this time, the main character was playing sports in his cell. He couldn't remember where he had seen that damn tattoo. Gu Naming approached him and boasted about Juyan's athletic achievements. He suggested that he drink grape juice after a good workout. The main character was not embarrassed by anything and immediately agreed. Gu Naming realized that at that moment, Juyan would immediately realize that the glass contained not juice, but insect repellent. He was afraid that the person watching the camera would immediately ask him about everything. Gu Naming was afraid that the same thing would happen to him as in the past. The former neat freak decided to make fun of him. He inserted a funnel into his mouth to rinse out pesticides. He opened the bottle of the remedy and poured it into Gu Naming's mouth. The young man fell to the floor and foam came out of his mouth. Cleanliness was not bothered by Gu Naming's poor condition, and simply continued washing the floor. The protagonist asked Gu Naming who gave him this juice, but he said that he bought it himself. All the prisoners immediately realized that something had been added to the main character's glass. Juyong agreed to the proposal and drank the grape juice. After that, he announced to the prisoners that they should get ready for bed, because there would be group training tomorrow. If Gu Naming had known that Juyan would agree to drink, he would have poured poison without hesitation. In the cell, the main character was drawing a tattoo of a blue dragon in his notebook. Gu Namin decided to get closer to Juyan and asked him about the drawing. The young man's goal was to drug someone. He wanted to analyze Juyan's behavior so he could poison him without anyone knowing. The main character told his interlocutor that it was necessary to find all the people who had a dragon tattoo. Gu Naming asked Juyan why he trusted him, since people like him were to be feared. The main character said that if a person knows how to deceive, it means he is smart. In conclusion, he said that a smart person would never have been at odds with him and turned off the light. In the morning, rumors spread around the prison that a notice of inspection had arrived. The prisoners were forced to clean up the entire prison. Earlier, Gu Namin promised the clean guy that he would disinfect Juyan's mouth. But after some time, he said that he would not do this. On behalf of Juyan, he apologized to the clean guy for his dirty words. He explained that Juyan is a shy guy who is afraid to come up and admit his mistake. Clean realized that Gu Naming was lying and hit him in the stomach. He pressed his head against the sink, imagining it was Juyan. Instead of the main character, he decided to disinfect Gu Naming's mouth. Pressing his foot on her head, he poured all the detergent on her. At that very moment, the main character appeared. Chistulya remembered the dirty words that this young man had spoken to him. Fortunately, by that time, Gu Naming had not been poisoned by pesticides. While cleaning, Gu Namin confessed to the supervisor about one situation. He said that someone had threatened him and told him to slip pesticides to Juyong. But he decided that he would not betray his close friend and would not give in to threats. Even if the consequences for him are terrible, he will still renounce what he did. He later added that the drawing that Juyan was looking for was on the body of that attacker. When the main character came to the washroom, pesticides got on his hand. He decided to wipe them on the neat guy's clothes. He immediately began foaming at the mouth due to his body coming into contact with the germs. The man said he would kill Juyan and cover his esophagus with lye. The main character threw him to the floor and beat him until he lost consciousness. He told him that he could kill him without any feeling of guilt. In the past, Clean was a promising grappling fighter. He was one of the strongest grapplers. His signature technique was the chokehold and pinning the opponent between his legs. But in reality, he was blocking the movement of his opponent's arms so that he could not move. But from that day on, no one saw his equipment again. Ironically, the one who played dirty had a weakness that was fatal for a fighter mysophobia. The main character asked the man with mysophobia to start talking. He was interested in who could find out anything about the celestial dragon. The young man began to twitch because the entire floor was covered in germs. Juyong gave him a few blows and asked him not to worry about cleanliness for the time being. Gu Naming was glad that he was on the side of Juyan, who punched like a fly swatter. The man with mysophobia shouted throughout the room that he would kill Juyan. Juyong wet his fist with sweat and decided to use shock therapy. He put his fist in the neat guy's mouth and he was in complete shock. He immediately remembered how after that fight he went to wash his hands. There was a mountain of garbage in his locker. When he screamed at what he saw, he was immediately grabbed by someone else. The man threw the patient to the floor and hit him several times. He said he heard that the athlete had developed mysophobia, which is why he can no longer use grappling. It turned out that the patient vomited right on this young man during the fight. After the memories, the clean guy shouted that he would crush Juyong, who made him dirty. Gu Naming was watching what was happening. He was waiting for the right moment to help Juyong cope with the patient. This situation reminded the main character of the old days. His father never hugged him like a son. He did this only during the fight and to such an extent that his bones ached. For the protagonist, these were truly disgusting memories. Well, thanks to this, he was not at all afraid to enter into any fight. He grabbed the prisoner by the arms and broke them at the elbows. The prisoners continued to clean every corner of the prison. The main character inserted a pouring funnel into the neat guy's mouth. After this, he tied all his limbs and ordered him to sit still. Min suggested changing the plan since this neat freak doesn't get it. Then the main character decided that shock therapy was not enough and began to take off his pants. Chistulya realized that the most humiliating thing was now awaiting him. Juyan took off his pants and went to the toilet right into the clean freak's mouth. After this, the patient's eyes rolled up as high as possible and tears started flowing from them. When Gu Naming took the funnel out of the prisoner's mouth, he asked him to tell him everything about that tattoo. When Clean was a newbie, he immediately went to inject himself with a blue dragon. The tattoo artist knew about his illness and did the job in the best possible way. With light movements, she drew a celestial dragon on his chest. She said that for this organization, the dragon is a symbol of strength and power, and the flower is a symbol of life. She added that no matter how beautiful a flower is, it will dry up someday. According to her, the celestial dragon is looking for young blood and young seeds for its organization. There are many opportunities for minors in this organization that adults do not have. The experience gained in this group will help you reach many heights. By hiring young talents, the organization grows them in its own garden. Seeds grown in such conditions are called celestial dragon flowers. Chistulia said that this is all he knows about his organization. The protagonist realized that the reason his father beat him was to grow him into a flower. His father raised him with brutal training. Chistulia asked Juyong why he was doing all this and assumed that he wanted to join this organization. However, the main character did not want this, because he had his own intentions. The patient decided to recommend his comrade to Juyong, but immediately received a blow to the face for his words. After this, all the prisoners decided to finish cleaning as quickly as possible. When the main character couldn't get a stain off the floor, he realized he needed bleach. He turned around and saw Gu Naming bowing and handing him a bottle of bleach. With his action, he said thank you to Juyong for helping him beat up that horrible guy. The protagonist reminded Gu Naming that he tortured him with poison. He knows that people die easily because of this, and he asked the guy how he survived. Gu Naming said that the problem was that he replaced the foam with soapy water. Protagonist asked Gu Naming not to thank him because he was just looking for that tattoo. He said he needed this tattoo so he could beat someone to death. So far he has only caught 2, but the prison is full of people wearing this tattoo. He tried to find something in common among the members of the organization, and realized that those 2 were the leaders of the cells. He decided to check everyone one by one who was watching the cameras. Gu Naming informed him that there was an event next week where all the camera leaders would gather. Once a quarter, the chapters meet to communicate and discuss various issues. But this is just a pretext, because in reality, inside the prison, they discuss all sorts of illegal things. The main character realized that he could now legally enter this event, since he was the viewer of his camera. Gu Naming asked him to be careful, because this prison is where all the criminals who are serving time for serious crimes are gathered. Among the leaders, he may meet the most hardened criminals, so he should not attract attention. At the meeting, one of the prisoners asked what happened to that guy who was sick with cleanliness. He was informed that Juyong had worked on this neat freak. Another prisoner said that this young man himself needed to be trained like a dog. The main character appeared in the room, immediately coming with a sharpened shovel. He rushed at one of the leaders and asked how his seeds were doing. Shortly before this, all the prisoners went to work to earn their food. Juyong's cellmates wanted to support him before heading to the meeting. At a meeting of prisoners, which was approved by the prison warden himself, illegal transactions and information exchange take place. The meeting is attended not by some petty criminals, but by real representatives of criminal organizations. The comrades wished Juyong good luck and to be especially careful at the meeting. When Juyong attacked one of the leaders on the spot, he promised to pull out all the shoots of this organization. He ordered the young man to fight him, but he refused. Park realized that Juyong was expecting him to take action in return. He said that the cell leaders he beat up had a special reason for enduring those beatings. Without a reason or cause, these people had no benefit in entering into this fight. But if the main character disrupts the general order with his reckless violence, something completely different will happen. The other chamber heads will have no compelling reason to keep him alive. The main character realized that by mindlessly bullying anyone, he could only become a target for other chapters. If you turn everyone against you, then the possibility of capturing this place and even the chances of survival will significantly decrease. It was a reckless move, but Juyong was glad he was able to confirm it. The man stood up and said that Juyong had a hatred for the celestial dragons. At this point, the meeting was declared open. The host announced that some people were unable to attend today due to injuries. They were Pak Chun, Kim Sung, Kang Gon Nim. One of the prisoners declared the main character to be the culprit of these incidents. After these words, Juyong was proclaimed the new head of cell number 36. There were about 15 people gathered in this cell, and so far no one had a dragon tattoo. Only one man had a tattoo on his neck. Juyong was given the floor as the newly proclaimed head of the chamber. He thought that there was nothing important in this title. He laughed in the faces of the leaders and said that they would get along. The host decided to move on to the second question of the meeting, namely the source of income. According to him, there are shops in the prison, some of the profits from which go to the prison director. However, in this quarter, Park Do-hwan's gambling house sent him the smallest share of profits. The man with the tattoo said that they would send the entire required amount by the end of the day. One of the leaders whispered in his ear that his gambling house was a complete scam. The head of the gambling house said that he knew better than anyone what would happen if he was caught in a lie. He asked those present to slit his throat if they caught his gambling house cheating. This gambling house is located in a training center for auto repair. The dealer at the gambling house was very polite with the new customers. He told the main character that each point in the room had its own game. But first, he decided to suggest playing a simple game called dice. The main character agreed to play a game with him. He threw the dice onto the table with special force in order to expose this gambling house. He said that there was a magnet inside the dice. He announced to the entire room that this organization was a scam. After Kwan took over as the prison's warden, the place became a den of crime. The main source of income in a prison is controlled by the warden. The shops provide the prison warden with a portion of the profits, and in return they receive benefits and freedoms that prisoners usually cannot even dream of. No one would have thought that a juvenile prison would become a criminal cartel. One such place is Park Do-han's gambling house. One of the prisoners lost all his money, but he wanted to win it back. The gambling house supervisor offered him one option. He handed him the documents and offered to provide collateral in exchange for money. The main character took a magnet out of the cube and said that it was the magnet that was preventing the prisoners from winning. He said that the dealer uses a magnet to control the number that comes up. The dealer explained that it was just a bead that controlled the center of gravity of the dice and handed Ju-young a magnet. The main character placed the bead against the magnet to test his guesses. However, the bead fell down and did not stick to the magnet. The dealer attached metal objects to a magnet to prove his case. After the incident, he invited the main character to play another game. The gambling house's supervisor watched what was happening. In a few minutes, Ju-young lost all the money he had earned. He knew that the chances of losing and winning were about the same. For a second, the main character believed that he was just a loser. He ran out of money and decided to bet a piece of paper. Suddenly, one of the men said from the side that everyone around was a scammer. He shouted for the organization to return his money, but its members refused him. The leader Pak pounced on the rebel and tried to calm him down. The man believed that his organization was an honest gambling house. He asked those present not to call him a fraud without any evidence. The rebel realized his mistake and asked for forgiveness from the leader Pak. The leader asked the young man to continue playing without any suspicion. It was strange that today everyone decided to pay attention to the organization's fraud. On camera that same day, Gu-na-min asked Ju-yeon if he liked the casino. The protagonist said that he left all the money in it, but never found any evidence of fraud. On this day, Gu-na-min also did not sit still and was able to steal cards from the gambling house. Thanks to the acting of Ju-yeon, Gyeom, and Gu-na-min, they were able to do their job. The main character did not understand how he could achieve the truth with the help of these cards. Pak decided to teach the rebel a lesson and leaned him against a spinning wheel. The leader was afraid that rumors would spread throughout the prison because of such people. Dealer Gu-na-min approached Park and apologized for the incident with Ju-yeon. Pak forgave the young man and asked him to work more responsibly in the future. Pak added that Ju-yeon definitely has hatred towards the celestial dragon. The leader wants to deal with Ju-yeon if he makes any more noise. Gu-na-min looked at the deck of cards and found a clue on them. Almost all the cards had a different pattern on the back. With these marks, you can guess what card is in your opponent's hand. The main character was glad that he found evidence of deception and reached justice. The gambling house boss promised himself that next time he would cut off Ju-young's head for his fuss. When Kim Jong-soo was released from prison, something terrible awaited him. He crossed the street and met a stranger who was glad to see him. The man asked if the young man had managed to play enough in the gambling house. The stranger began to threaten Kim Jong-soo, and he did not understand what was happening. A few moments later, he remembered that the gambling house boss had forced him to provide his organs as collateral. The young man turned around and saw an ambulance nearby, which was clearly waiting just for him. The stranger pushed him into the car and locked the door. Thanks to his good organs, Kim Jong-sun managed not only to repay the debt, but also to provide the stranger with new teeth. It turned out that the ringleader, Park Do-hwan, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for an organ trafficking agreement. The man asked Park to stop doing this nonsense with the gaming house. He warned him that sooner or later the head of the prison would disappear, and he would be left alone with all this responsibility. However, Park believed that there were no problems in this world that could not be solved with money. The protagonist examined the deck of cards and also found some clues. The protagonist's cellmate was proud that he was able to discover this evidence. Ju-young informed his comrades that he was going to deal with the gambling house, since now the weapons were only on his side. He invited Gyeom and the second prisoner to visit the gambling house. When Ju-young returned to the gambling house, he was happily greeted by the dealer. Before revealing the true nature of these scammers, the protagonist decided to play one game. But the leader of the gambling house, Park Do-hwan, sat down at his table. He told Ju-yeon that his personality had intrigued him too much. The leader offered the protagonist to play a game in exchange for important information about the Blue Dragon. In the history of this gaming house, there has never been a case where the head himself played games. This time, Ju-yeon decided to choose a card game, since it is usually in this game that beginners are lucky. The dealer decided on his own that they would now play a very simple game called Memory. Players need to turn over cards and look for identical numbers. The one who finds a pair continues to turn over the cards, and in case of a mistake, the turn goes to the opponent. In this game, you need to try to remember as many card locations as possible. The main character was confident in himself, because he remembers all the marks on the cards. However, if something goes wrong, his life is in serious danger. All the prisoners of the gaming house gathered around Park and Ju-yeon's table. The protagonist looked at the cards and realized that there were no marks on them. The leader of the organization immediately realized that Ju-yeon was looking for a pattern on the cards. He said that his gambling house uses only the highest quality deck. All of Ju-yeon's comrades were worried about the current situation. Ju-yeon no longer felt confident in front of Park. The dealer announced the start of the game and invited the players to place their bets. The leader of the gambling house put a large sum of money on the line. The protagonist approached the dealer and said that he had no money. The young man told Ju-yeon that in that case he could leave a deposit. He handed him the documents about the sale of his organs for him to sign. The prisoners had only heard about this from rumors and did not think that it was real. Ma-gyeom realized that his cellmate had no chance of winning. Gu Na-ming assumed that the protagonist would end the game here and not sign the documents. However, Ju-yeon grabbed the pen and signed the organ pledge document. He had no other choice because in this situation it was no longer possible to refuse. Ju-yeon confidently announced to those present that he would bet everything from the tips of his hair to his toes. The dealer accepted Ju-yeon's bet and announced the start of the game. The head of the gaming house was confident of his clear victory. Ju-yeon's comrades did not understand why he signed, since he knew that a swindler was playing with him. The main character changed his plan of action and planned something serious. The dealer reiterated the rules of the game, which required players to find identical cards. The dealer gave the right to make the first move to the main character. When Ju-yeon drew the first card, it was a black 8. Unfortunately, on his second move, he made a mistake and drew a red 9. The dealer gave the next move to Park Do-hwan. The man pulled out the first card, and it turned out to be a black 9. Thanks to Ju-yeon's previous move, he was able to open the second 9. Everyone present understood that the head of the gambling house would have more luck than the newcomer. The head of the organization knew the location of any map from the very beginning. The location of the card was agreed upon in advance with the dealer present. Park announced to everyone with particular pride that luck was on his side today. While the young players don't understand anything, the swindler takes away all their moves. While playing, he remembered his father, who constantly asked him questions about love. Each time the son answered that he loved his father very much. However, he explained his love by the fact that his father brings him money every day. For the sake of his son, Do-hwan, a man must give his best at work. Park's father was the most reliable man in the world. At least that's what Do-hwan thought. But as it turned out, he didn't go to work, but to the casino. After some time, the son learned that his father's debt had exceeded 500,000 won. The head of the gambling house did not want to be as stupid as his father. That is why in his activities he chooses the side of deception. The main character grabbed one of the cards and told everyone that he would now prove the fact of fraud. He pulled out a second card and immediately made a pair. With the next two moves, he again revealed identical cards. Everyone believed that the young man was still far from being the head of the organization, and he would clearly lose. When the main character opened almost all the cards, Park became alarmed because not only he and the dealer knew the layout of the cards. When this dealer last rolled up the gaming table, he found a piece of paper that was Ju-yeon's bet. He opened it and saw that there was an invitation to meet behind the toilet. Behind the toilet, the main character, Ju-yeon, was waiting for him and wanted to have a serious talk. He informed the dealer that he was aware of the fact that the organization was fraudulent and had fake cards. The young man told Ju-yeon that they were not using those stolen maps with the marks. The main character promised the young man that he would save him in exchange for one favor. The dealer worked in the gambling house in order to work off his debt. Ju-yeon promised him to return all the money for him. The main thing is that he only helps him with this. The young man refused, but Ju-yeon immediately convinced him otherwise. Jong-soo had only 1 week left before he had to pay back his debt and have his organs cut out. The young man, having returned to freedom, did not want to go under the knife again. The main character asked the dealer to help him reveal the whole truth about the gambling house. Ju-yeon told those present that he simply remembered the entire layout that the dealer revealed to him, and this surprised Park. The dealer agreed that all games played in the room were rigged. All the prisoners turned to Park with a request that he return all the money they had lost. The head of the organization insisted that there was no evidence of fraud in the gambling house. Park Do-hwan got angry and hit the table with all his might. The main character recalled the words that Park said at the meeting of the overseers. Ju-yeon lifted the table over the man's head and wanted to smash it into pieces. At that moment, Park remembered a situation from his childhood, when his father lost all his money and hid from him. The distraught man believed that he had done nothing wrong, as he was simply trying to earn money for his son. He reminded Hwang that he was constantly demanding large amounts of money from him. Due to debts he got into while gambling at a casino, he ended up in a hospital bed. Then Park Do-hwan realized that without money he could not protect his family. When the main character suddenly lowered the table to the floor, he realized that the leader had escaped. Suddenly, Do-hwan appeared behind the protagonist and struck him in the head. After that, he went to Jong-soo, who betrayed him and exposed him as a fraud. He grabbed him by the throat and threatened him with a long retribution. The young man said he had evidence of fraud. However, the evidence was in the bag that another dealer was about to take out. Park didn't understand how Jong-soo could slander his gambling house for teaming up with an outsider. It immediately dawned on him that Juyen had promised the young man to repay the gambling debt for him. Pak struck the young man and threw him towards Juyen. He said that he does not blame him for what happened, but that is also true. But he also does not forgive what was done. Dealer Chung-soo fell to the floor and lost consciousness. While Pak was dealing with the young man, the main character appeared behind him. A brawl broke out in the gambling house, during which several people were thrown against the wall. When Huang's father was hospitalized, he immediately realized that his father had paid off all his debts with his organs. The card dealer insisted that Do Hwan stop caring about his pathetic father and make money off of him. The young man's eyes lit up just from the thought that he could make money from this situation. The main character decided to deal once and for all with the man who illegally cut out several hundred organs from people. During the battle, Pak revealed that all of Juyong's comrades were working for this organization and were receiving his money. He asked him not to interfere in what was happening, because everyone earns money as best they can. Pak dealt a powerful blow to the protagonist and threw him into the windshield of the car. Jong-soo believed that Juyon's life would end in this room. Pak turned to those around him and asked for forgiveness for the inconvenience caused. He tried to explain to people what he had done, but the main character said that there was no deception in this organization. The main character told the people to continue playing games and suggested playing hide and seek. He started counting to 5 and went to look for those who were not hiding. He got out of the car and told Do Hwan that if he found him, he would become a corpse. When he counted to 5 again, the head of the organizations was standing in the same place. The man began to regret that he would have to say goodbye to the place that had brought him so much. He did not want to simply end the activities of his large organization. The protagonist promised him that he would turn into ashes everything he had achieved. Ju-yeon announced that the next game would begin, and lots would be drawn. He rolled the dice and the number 3 came up. This meant that Ju-yeon would deliver 3 powerful blows to Park's face. Next, the move was given to the head of the organization, Paku. The dice fell and showed the highest value. The protagonist hit Pak in the face 6 times, and he almost lost consciousness. While unconscious, Pak remembered the situation when the tattoo artist was putting a design on him. Then he knew that the girl was a scout of the Celestial Dragon. He brought her a large sum of money and asked her to take him into her ranks. He had a special plan that would bring the tattoo artist countless amounts of money. He grabbed the instrument and put it to her throat to force the girl to accept him into her ranks. The tattoo artist saw in Pak's eyes a special desire to join her organization. During the fight between Park and Ju-yeon, Ma Gyeom also did not sit still. He took the bag of evidence from the second dealer and scattered it all over the location. Playing cards and several dice fell to the floor. Gyeom asked those present to pay attention to the fact that all of this was in the hands of the escaped dealer. The young man said that this was real evidence of the gambling house's fraud. After this, the prisoners again turned to Pak to get all their money back. The head of the organization squeezed all the money in his hand and said that those present would not receive a penny from him. The protagonist lifted a chair and delivered a powerful blow to the man's head. Ju-yeon announced to those present that there was one last game left, which was to endure an electric shock. The protagonist electrocuted Pak and wanted to burn everything related to the fraud. After a year and 2 months, Park Do-hwan was released. Despite his bad luck in prison, he still broadened his perspective. He wanted to start all over again, but suddenly he met an old friend. He was clearly waiting for Pak Hwan to return to freedom. He apologized to the young man for not being able to provide him with the prisoner's documents on the pledge of their organs. At that moment, the card dealer decided to deal with Pak, who had borrowed some money from him in the past. He pointed to the ambulance and offered to pay him back right away. The former prisoner owed him about 1 billion won. The prison announced that Park Do-hwan was finished once and for all. The protagonist thanked Gyeom and Gu Na-min for helping him uncover the fraud. Pak was already the 3rd person from the Celestial Dragon that Ju-young had dealt with. The hero wanted to find the next Celestial Dragon as soon as possible. The young people noticed that there were strangers in their cell. The stranger was looking at a photo of Diana, who had recently died in an accident. Without thinking, Ju-young rushed at the young man and dealt him several blows. He asked his friend to bring him a pillow so as not to make unnecessary noise. This stranger had previously attended a meeting of all the cell keepers. He watched as Ju-yeon threatened Park to deal with his precious seeds. The stranger poked Ju-yeon's nose into the drawing of the blue dragon. The protagonist immediately realized that this man was somehow connected with the history of the Celestial Dragon. The stranger offered his help in capturing the remaining members of the organization. To begin with, he decided to clear up the misunderstanding and said that the photograph had fallen out of the album by itself. The main character took the photo from him and asked him to leave the cell. Ju-yeon was the head of this room and he had enough freedom in the prison. However, according to the stranger, his actions without any plan lead to the other room leaders planning to kill him. The young man said there were far more dangerous people in juvenile prison than he could imagine. Ju-yeon thought it was right not to trust the uninvited guest. The hero did not understand what benefit this man would gain if he helped him. He immediately asked the guest what his true goals were, but he said that he just wanted a rush of dopamine. The next day, all the prisoners gathered in the prison assembly hall. Girls performed religious songs on stage. Most of those present were believers and enjoyed the music. After some stories, the main character was truly able to clear his head of negativity. During his speech, he recalled moments from his childhood and one acquaintance, Lee Da-young, who had been his friend since she was 17. He looked closely at all the girls on stage and realized that it was she. After the performance, the girls announced to all the prisoners that they had come there to spread the holy faith. During his speech, Lee Da-yeon also recognized the prisoner as his old comrade. After the performance, the girl and Ju-yeon met in a secluded place. Lee Da-yeon felt awkward talking to her old friend since they hadn't spoken for a long time. They used to spend a lot of time together, but quite a few years have passed. The main character told his friend about Dayona's death and about his loneliness. The girl took off her outerwear and offered to help Ju-yeon get rid of his sadness. During school days, all the boys only paid attention to Lee Da-young. However, the girl only communicated with the main character, Ju-yeon. One day she invited him to go with her to have some fun, but the main character refused and said that he was meeting with Dayona today. After that situation, the girl was left with some resentment towards Ju-yeon. She took off another layer of clothing and suggested to her friend to keep all the grievances to a minimum. At this time, guards were passing by the room. The girl jumped up from her seat and said that she was going to dinner. The main character promised to see her in 3 years when she was free. However, she said that their meeting would be next week. It turned out that the employees of this church come to the prison every Sunday. Lee Da-young sheepishly told her friend that they would be seeing each other much more often than expected. At dinner, the two girls whispered that the rumors about Lee Da-young were true. According to them, the girl comes here only to flirt with the prisoners. One of the prisoners suggested to his comrade that they go to the locker room to observe the church workers. At this time, the girls were already undressed almost to the maximum. As the men watched the naked girls, the main character appeared behind them. Besides him, the most religious prisoner observed these actions and dealt the men several blows for what they had done. The believer asked his cellmates not to break the commandments and not to watch half-naked girls. A week after another performance by the employees, the main character went to the warehouse, where armed prisoners were waiting for him. These were the very ones he had prevented from watching the girls. They stabbed him several times and pierced the donation items. After this, all the contents of the bottles fell out on them. The main character asked the prisoners who sent them here. However, they did not have time to answer the question, because the supervisor came to the noise in the warehouse. When he walked inside, he saw a half-naked Lee Da-young and Ju-yeon. The girl pointed to her old comrade and told the warden that he had abused her.